Playing out of position in poker is one of the hardest things to do, but in this video, I'm gonna give you 3 different types of bluffs that you can use to start fighting back against those pesky players that play very aggressively in position. I'm gonna give you 3 different types of bluffs you can use out of position. One on the flop, one on the turn, one of the river. The further you go down, the more complex the strategies get and the harder it is to execute in game. So viewer discretion is advised. Use these at your own risk. It is always important to study off the table so you don't blunder in game. These are 3 types of bluffs you can use when you're playing out of position. So we're gonna start with number 1. The first type of bluff I'm gonna show you is the old check raise. So on this hand, I raise the cutoff and the button 3 bets, and you're supposed to call a quarter of the time. I do 50% for simplicity's sake. I call flop 9-3-2, and the button, even with leads, is supposed to check back about 60% of the time. He decides to bet for a half pot, which is what I expect most people would do. However, I do not expect most people to check back 60% of the time. 8-7 of hearts is a pure fold. However, if our opponent is range betting, 8-7 suited becomes a pure raise. As you can see, we're supposed to raise a ton if our opponent is range betting. 8-7 suited becomes a pretty nice check raise because you got a backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw. And it's pretty easy to play. Even if once you get called, the barrels become pretty apparent. Here's another tip when you're bluffing. Just because you decide to bluff one street doesn't mean you need to continue bluffing the rest of the hand. Like if you raise pre-flop and you get called, you don't have to just bet, jam all in every time. You can be more selective. So even if you do check raise here and your opponent calls, you don't have to go crazy and bluff on every freaking run out. You can sleep well at night knowing that your bluffs are gonna have fold equity on every street. But anyways, yeah, I check raise and he does fold, thankfully. So that's the first type of bluff, the old check raise when you're out of position. So this is bluff number 2. After the flop goes check call, you could donk bet on cards that are good for your range. So in this spot, bottom card is pretty good for out of position, just because he has a more 4x. Also, if you think about it, the out of position player doesn't have any bad hands anymore because they're filtered. They fold all their really bad hands on the flop to the flop c-bet, whereas the in position player still has their range wide open, especially if they're range betting or close to it. I just want you to show you over here as well that this is a quote-unquote thing. So button bets, we can check raise, we can call. We decided to call, and as you can see, 4 of spades, bottom card pairing, we do get about 9% donk bets, and 6-3 suited does get in there. And button has to fold 30%, and this is if our opponent is checking back 53% of the time, he's still gonna fold 30% to this 20% bet on the turn, this donk bet. But in reality, you have way more fold equity because people stab way more. They don't check back 50% of the time. So this is bluff number 2. Check call flop, donk bet small on cards that are good for you. And we're gonna go to bluff type number 3. This one's pretty advanced. It's the old block, get raised to 3-bet on the river, which is pretty sick. So you could add this to your toolbox, you know what I mean? Bluff number 3, block, get raised to 3-bet bluff. Okay, so we're gonna do button versus big blind again. We'll say the flop's something like queen 9-3. Flop goes check, our opponent bets, we call. Turn is another queen. Turn goes check, check. And now on the river brick, as the big blind, you're gonna have a couple different sizes. But as you can see, the main size used is the block. So the idea here is you block with hands that want to get thin value, but you also want to put some nutted hands in there so you can 3-bet the river. So a good hand to block 3-bet for value would be like hands that just are too good. Like queen 9 is the first one that I would think to put in this size. As you can see, it never goes big with queen 9 just because it blocks all the calls. So you go 1/3, and when your opponent does find the raise for a bluff or for value, you hit them with the old 3-bet re-raise on the river, which is pretty sick. You're also gonna have to balance this with bluffs though. However, good hands to put in this block 3-bet for a bluff would be like hands that block his best value, that remember, bet the flop, check the turn, and now is re-raising the river bet. So the first hand that comes to mind that plays this way very like intuitively would be hand queen 9. Exactly, it would check back the turn. So you want to block 3-bet with hands like 5x, 9x that block both. You don't really have to like 3-bet bluff like queen x just because the hands just had so much value, and your opponent's still gonna have some bluffs. So Queen X, like weaker Queen X, you could just call. Although like really good players will like start block 3-betting Queen X for a bluff. That's just kind of crazy though. So stick to like hands that block his most likely value, the way he played the hand. So like in my opinion, that would be like pocket 5s and like Queen 9. Even though 5s isn't supposed to bet, it's not really in range. I think again, people would play pocket 5s like this. It's very, very believable just how people play. So any 9 really, or any 5x, you can potentially block 3-bet bluff. You shouldn't always do it. It's nice to have that in your back pocket. You know what I mean? It's the third type of bluff. So again, to recap, first type of bluff was check raise. Second type of bluff is the dunk bet. It's you call flop and dunk, bet small on cards that are good for your range. Remember, because your opponent filtered you down with his flop bet on the flop, whereas he's more wide on the turn, and you're more you have more value hands than he does, especially if he's range betting. And the third type of bluff that we looked at is the block bet on the river to 3-bet. Remember, you want to pick hands that make sense to block bet, because it has to multi-functional. Remember, the first benefit of block betting the river is you get thin value. Also, you get to set your price for when he does have you beat. You don't lose as much as if you were to check call a B75 on the river instead of 1/3, for example. So that's the first function. You get thin value. You can also quote unquote set your own price for when you are beat. You lose less. And the second function is if he does reopen the action, you do have an option to bluff raise on the river. You don't want to choose all your hands. For example, if you block bet pocket 8s here, for example, if you block bet, this is not a hand you would block 3-bet with, because it doesn't block any of your opponent's value bets. If you block bet something like 9-8, for example, or 5x, any 5x, or any 9x, those are potential hands that you can block 3-bet bluff with. You have options, is what I'm trying to tell you. But remember, make sure that you're not unbalanced with this, whereas you have no block bets, 3-bets for value. Hands that completely lock down the board are a good example to block bet on the river and 3-bet for value. And same goes with bluffs. You want to block bet with hands that can get value from hands that are weaker than yours. Also can set your price for hands that are better than that would bet bigger against your hand, and also it gives you an option to 3-bet bluff. So yeah, these are the 3 different types of bets you want to have in your tool belt for bluffing out of position. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll hit you with some more of that good. All right, peace.